and welcome Wendy Brentnall.
Thank you very much, Kevin. And yes, my apologies for sending you all into lockdown. Hopefully, it won't get any worse after tonight for some reason. Cool. Now, I'll just share my screen with you and we'll get on with the serious business of flashcards. Strangely enough, the last couple of years, I've actually gone back into doing a lot of work with primary school teachers, mentoring teachers who are generalist classroom teachers and they want to get started on teaching music in their classroom. And so I was digging out my flashcards and I just found them so very useful. I thought it would be great to share with you. Now, 100 ways to use flashcards. I must admit, I didn't actually count the ways, so don't panic if you think, oh God, she's only up to number 40 now and we've still got 61 to go, because that's just a random number that was picked to make the title grab your attention. All right, so how are flashcards going to help us get from some sort of frustration of learning or not learning to actually having fun? Well, I did a little bit of quick research for you, and flashcards have got all sorts of different ways of being helpful as an additional way of getting concepts of music into the heads of our learners. And I do find them useful for all ages, for preschoolers right through to seniors. So there's no age limit on when you can use flashcards. So flashcards engage what they call the active recall, where by making you actually think about something rather than just read something and try and absorb it, it uses your neurons in a stronger way to enable you to retain information more easily than simply being told or learning it from reading. That's the first point for using flashcards. Flashcards also enable us to do repeat learning, so we're memorizing individually or working with other people to memorize the names and meanings of various things. They also give us the capacity of deciding what is the priority in our learning, so optimal efficiency, as it's been called. And in optimal efficiency, you are able to select out which flashcards you really need to work more on, and you can put them into a separate group to the flashcards and the concepts that you understand really well. So it's based on a confidence type approach, and there's lots of scientific research that tells us that this is the really good way of improving your performance. And then the really good part about flashcards is that you can make up lots and lots of different games for using them, which can be fun. And if you have students who are very competitive, and you can use that as great motivation for them as well. So if I haven't convinced you yet, or if you weren't convinced before you got onto this webinar, then hopefully you will soon find that there's lots of different ways you can use it and you will be willing and able to give them a try. Now, I have grouped my flashcards into 5 different groups. So I'm going to take you through the different sorts of groups or card types, as I've called them here, that I have broken my flashcards into. And we will also look at obviously how to use them as well, and you'll see some examples. We won't have time to go through every single game or activity that I use them for, but we will get through hopefully enough examples for you to then be able to move forward with them. So this first card type is where you are introducing instruments of some type to your students. Most typically, I would imagine this would happen in a classroom type setting or in a group class type setting. The ones on the left that you can see, there's a triangle and a djembe and so on and so forth. I've used those in my preschool and junior primary classes in lots of different ways. And the ones on the right-hand side could be for instruments such as Indigenous instruments or orchestral instruments or rock band instruments or whatever group of instruments or family of instruments that you are working on in your classes. To give you an idea of how I might use instrument flashcards, I've picked out the percussion ones, which, as I said, I use mostly for the younger age group. And you'll find that these particular ones, which I've put together for my own particular use in my music school, have the picture of the instrument on one side, and on the other side, not only do they have an identifying name, but they've also got the name of the particular instrument. Now, there's obviously the capacity for you to put additional information on the back if you're creating your own. And things you might like to put on there would be further description, excuse me, of how you play the instrument, what family it belongs to, or any other significant information to describe that particular instrument. It might be, for example, if it's a woodwind instrument, whether it's a B flat instrument or an E flat instrument, how many strings it has if it's in the string family, and so on and so forth. So depending on what information you've got on the back, you'll be learning, or the students will be learning, the name of the instrument and how to match that to the particular instrument. Perhaps how to learn to play it. So do they tap it? Do they shake it? How do they make a sound from it? And as I said, the instrument family it comes from potentially. The sorts of games that I would use for these are fairly standard, fairly basic. What I call flash and name is literally when you hold up the card. In this case, I would hold up the picture to the class and either ask them something like, what's the name of this instrument? And they would then need to tell me, oh, these are the rhythm sticks, or if we've gone down the path of calling them claves or whatever else you want to add to that information, they would need to be able to give you that information. You might hold up the card, another instance, say, right, can you go and find me this instrument? So they have to literally go and find which tub it is to be able to then play it in your activity. You might play the instrument behind a screen, and then they have to match that to the picture and then to the name and so forth. And similarly, they might need to match the cards. If you've got a whole suite of different cards, match them by family. So if you've got cards that have got violins and you've got drums and you've got trumpets and you've got all these different instruments, you might also have them with magnets all over your board, and they have to group them according to families. So those sorts of games are the types of things that you can do using instrument flashcards. Now, the second type of cards that I like to use, I've sort of lumped a whole heap together in here, are symbols and terms. So the cards you can see on the screen here down the bottom, the Forte card, and then in the bottom right, the black cards, which have got the key signature. Those types of cards I use constantly in my instrumental music teaching. So I have a pack that goes with every single method book that we use. So every single symbol, every note value, every note, everything that comes into the student's music, which happens progressively, one lesson at a time, there's always something new, there will be a flashcard for it. So straight away we have got all of the concepts they're learning, separately identifiable for them to then take away and do that separation and build their confidence and know what all of these different things are. The cards you see up in the top right, the Allegro with the bunny rabbit going very fast, being tempo cards. I've got those that I've used before with the preschool classes when we start to introduce the terminology that we want them to grow into for instrumental learning and traditional music notation. So they can be used for movement and other activities and identifying what the music sounds like as well. So that would be one example of tempo. And then of course you've got things like key signatures. Now all of these you can build them out to whatever level of learning you want. So you can have key signatures that go across every conceivable mode and key that the students need, right through to the highest level. And when I've put students through AMEB or ANSCA exams, and they've got a huge list of scales and chords and exercises that they have to know to prepare for those instrumental exams, I will often get them to use flashcards where they can randomize which scale or which exercise or which chord progression that they're going to practice, so that they get that very, very random order every single time they practice through those scales and exercises in those last couple of months. Because as you probably know, a lot of students will go from the top of the page to the bottom of the page and always play their scales in the same order. And you throw them into a different order and all of a sudden they get a little bit lost. So having that ability to do flashcards with things like key signatures and scales and so forth can be very beneficial. When it comes to the learning goals for dynamics, which is the one that I've selected to give you an example of here, we're asking them to learn what the meaning of the symbol is. So if it's an abbreviation such as P for piano or F for forte, and that will depend on your set of cards, how you present those things, then you'll want them to know the full name, you'll want them to know the meaning. You might also do it from the sound and say, well, which one matches this sound? And then the reverse, where you ask them to play according to that dynamic. So you can use these as random things where even for individual students, you're pulling a card out and say, right, let's play this scale using this dynamic level. Or you might have a classroom of students who are playing a simple tune on whatever instruments they're learning on, whether it's on glockenspiels or ukuleles or whatever it might be, and you can again pull out a card and say, right, let's play the tune at this dynamic level, and then randomize it. Let's play this tune at this dynamic level. And you can get the students to be the conductors, and they can choose different sections to be played at different dynamic levels to help them understand how to play at those different dynamic levels, as well as what they recognize when they hear somebody else doing it. Now, the sorts of games that we can use are the flash and name, the same thing as I mentioned earlier, where you hold it up and ask them to give you the name or the description. And then any sort of matching game, so matching what's on the back of the card, as in the forte example that's on the page here. You've got the piano card 1A, it says forte F on one side, so you hold that up as being, well, which one is the matching meaning? And you'd have a second copy of the card facing the other way that they'd have to try and match up. And similarly matching the symbol to the sound and demonstrating the sound. Now this is where it starts to get really interesting. Beat and rhythm. So when it comes to beat and rhythm, again, we can use this for absolute beginners right through to very advanced players. But tonight I'm going to talk mostly about the beginner levels, where it's really important that students understand how to read rhythm and keep a steady beat and all of those things. You can then obviously extrapolate this out and make your flashcards um, more and more difficult and complex for them to introduce new note values and things as needed. So we have on the page here a heart, which is a flashcard that you can use for, particularly for juniors, to help them to understand the beat of the music. And then in the bottom right, those yellow cards, you can see each individual card has a separate note value on it. So I call those note value cards, where it's just one particular note type on it. And then we have the bigger rhythm card down the bottom. And those ones, as I've indicated in the text, I like to use a whole lot of different levels of cards to gradually introduce more and more note values to students using lots of different games. So using the example of rhythm, we have got a variety of cards on the screen here. So up the top, we've got the headless rhythm, one bar rhythms. So we've got a ta, ta, ti, ti, ta. And then we've got a ticka, ticka, ti, ti, ta, za. So using that type of language, I find particularly useful for the foundation to, grade 2, 3 students, or even up to the grade 6 students if they've got absolutely no understanding of music whatsoever. You can start with these very simplified ways of writing down note values and rhythms, and then progress to the crotchets and quavers, and or you might call them quarter notes and quarter rests and half notes. That part of it's irrelevant when it comes to this. It's your choice entirely. But looking at the different levels, I would use, starting from the very juniors, the headless rhythm cards for several levels. So they'll start with tar, titi, and za in their first 6 months to year, and then we'll add in the ticker tickers. So then there's another set of cards. It's got the ticker tickers, and it might have T tickers as well. So you've got your quaver attached to your semi-quavers, and then you might introduce your tar R's and so on and so forth, so that for the first couple of years at school in the classroom, they might only see the rhythms that have got no heads on them. And then they will progress gradually into the rhythms which have got, and the note value cards, which have got the heads on them. And it's quite a simple transition for them. I haven't come across any kids who have been thrown by it, other than the fact that when they first see it, they go, "Oh, what are those?" And obviously you have to explain how that works, but it's usually a easy transition for them. So then, having gone on to the crotchet quavers and crotchet rests, you'd then go through the process of adding in additional note values such as minims and semi-breves and triplets and so forth, and have a set of cards that are maybe a dozen or so that add in each of those concepts progressively. So you might end up with, if you're like me, about a dozen different sets of one bar rhythm cards that you can progressively then move students through as they go through the classes. The individual note value cards, which are the ones that you see down the bottom, the larger cards, and also the ones that are coloured, can also be used in different ways. If you look at the coloured ones there, you might see that there's, in bright yellow, there's a time signature of 4/4, And then if you look very, very carefully at the very end of those 4 beats, you might see what looks like an icy pulse stick. And that's exactly what it is. They make great bar lines, and you can even do double bar lines. And if you have some little buttons or something like that, you can even turn them into repeat signs if you wish. So they're great for composing if you've never tried that one before. So they're the types of rhythm cards that I like to use. And looking at the types of things we're expecting them to learn, I would like them to know the names, as in crotchet or quarter note and so forth. I would also like them to be able to recognise the sound of each note value, as in how long it is in relation to the beat. To be able to demonstrate that by playing or singing it. To recognise it in rhythms, and to be able to play rhythms as well. All pretty obvious stuff, I would imagine. Now, because this is such a big area, teaching beat and rhythm to students in their early years, I've ended up putting together quite a few games that I use. There's a gazillion out there, and I'm sure that you've all probably got a few of your own favourites as well. So I really just picked out my go-to games that I like to use. So if you are teaching individuals, so this might be in your instrumental lessons, then again, using your note value cards, you've got your typical flash and name. Hold it up, tell me something about this note. How many beats is it? What's it called? And so forth. You might then, if you've got duplicates, get them to match that up so they don't have to verbalize it. They just have to show you by matching them. You might put some together and get them to then identify it. If you use your rhythm cards, you can set out 3 or 4 rhythms and ask them, which one of those did I just play or clap or sing? And they can identify it by picking it up or pointing to it, or if you've numbered them and got them stuck on your wall or whatever it is you do. The next one, which I've called What Happened Here, is where you will have a rhythm card in front of them, but you will play it or sing it with a mistake, and they have to find out which beat you did wrong. Kids love to find where the teacher's gone wrong. So that's usually a fun one for them to do. And one of the things actually before I forget to mention is with these 1-bar rhythm cards, there's absolutely nothing to stop you putting a couple together. So if 1 bar is too easy for them, you put 2 together and all of a sudden they've got 2 bars. And if you've got some of those icy pole sticks, you can even put your bar line in between. Or if you've got a magnetic whiteboard, you can stick them on your magnetic whiteboard and draw the bar lines and time signatures and things in between as well. So that's what happened here. Now the reverse rhythmic The reverse rhythm dictation, I've got my 2 words muddled, is where the student actually gets the card. So they randomly get a card, and then they have to clap that without showing it to the teacher, and the teacher has to write it down for them. So again, the teacher can make mistakes, and that way the student has to be the one who can correct the teacher, and that's always a good learning thing and a confidence builder for students. And of course you can do the typical rhythm dictation as well, using your cards as prompts to then be able to show the student which one you did. Now, a scavenger hunt is usually when you go looking for something, and a rhythm scavenger hunt is no different. So you can place rhythm cards around the room You might just start with maybe 3 rhythm cards and place them in different corners of the room, and you play one or clap one or sing one, and the student has to look around the room, find the cards and find which was the one that you played and bring it back to you, of course. Now, the more cards you have out there, the harder it is and the longer you can make the game go for. So you can keep playing cards until they bring them all back for you. And obviously you can try and trick them by playing rhythms that are not there and see what happens. Always fun throwing in some random things like that. Now, rhythm composition and performance can be done either with the individual note value cards, such as I showed you in that last slide where we had the coloured cards and the time signatures and the icy pulse stick bar lines. So you can give students a bunch of note value cards and just ask them to organise them into the correct number of beats per bar, and then they can clap or play those on a single note or on a chord or whatever it is that they're capable of playing at the time. You can take it further and then add some pitch to it later if you wish as well. So that can be used also with the longer rhythm cards if you want them to make longer compositions, or a combination of the two. Very easy way of getting students to compose. Now, the headbands game is possibly something that you're familiar with in other contexts, but the rhythm headbands is where you literally have a rhythm card given to you. So if you're the one who's the guinea pig, you are holding up the rhythm card on your above your head, or it's hidden behind you where you can't see it. You don't actually have to have it attached to a headband, but that's the basic game where it's there, you can't see it, and the person who you are playing it with has to play or clap the rhythm, and you have to figure out what that rhythm is and write it down using the individual note cards to get that correct, and then switch with the other person who will then have a card that they will hold up that they haven't seen, and vice versa. The mystery song game is where, if you've been, particularly with juniors, you've been learning lots of simple songs, might be as simple as Twinkle Twinkle or Hot Cross Buns or whatever, that you recognise the song by its rhythm. So you would clap the rhythm and say, does that sound like Twinkle Twinkle, or does that sound like Hot Cross Buns? So you'll give them some parameters and see if they can recognise which one it is. Just make sure you you know that the rhythms are different. And the last one on this page is the one that goes with the photo. It's called the Fly Swat game. And if you can't quite see, the girl in the photo is holding a very fancy fly swat. It's got some sort of a soft toy attached to the back of it, not actually being used as a fly swat, but the teacher is calling out a particular card, and she has to swat the card with her fly swat to show that she knows which one it is, and to grab that and take it out of the game. So it's just a different way of getting them to participate in the game, rather than just saying, oh, it's that one there. Now, if we're taking classes, classroom music, or if you've got groups of instrumental classes, then the opportunity to play rhythm games is almost endless. And there's some really fun stuff you can do that will engage kids who might otherwise feel that theory and so forth can be a bit dull and boring. The kids who really don't like doing written work or sitting still for too long can be really, really engaged in these types of activities. Now, if you are taking classroom music, a lot of the activities we've talked about as being individual games can be translated into a group game as well. And that's usually just a matter of, excuse me, of forming teams, and you can give the teams names, and then as each team gets a correct answer, they get a point, and so on and so forth, so that you then end up with a winner at the end, and then you can decide what the winning team gets to do. They get to be the first one to line up at the door, or they get tokens, or however you like to reward your particular classes. So don't forget to use or adapt the individual games. Now, the rhythm partner hunt, which is the first one we have here for the group games, is as simple as giving every student and you can do this with note value cards as well, but I've written it down here, a rhythm card, so a 1 bar rhythm, and making sure that there are at least 2 of the same rhythm in the room. And you essentially get the kids to walk around holding up their rhythm in front of them. Once they've had a good look at it and they know how to clap it or play it or how it sounds, and then they simply have to find somebody else who's got exactly the same rhythm card, and then they get to sit down as a group and basically say, "We're done." And the aim is usually to see who can do it the quickest. So again, if you want to reward the quickest people, you can do it that way. Now, if you end up with having 3 or 4 of the same card, it doesn't have to be just partners, it can be in teams. So if you've got large classes or a small number of rhythms being used, you can do it with however many you wish. Now, the rhythm train game is where you would give, usually I would do this sitting in a circle, or you can do it sitting in rows, but every student is allocated a different rhythm card. Now, often these rhythm cards too, if you run out of rhythm cards or you haven't got time to create them for a new particular rhythm or whatever, you can translate them into just rhythms written on the board, and you might number them as well. So let's say you've got 20 students in your class. So on your board you would have 20 1-bar rhythms that you've stuck on the board, and you've allocated each student and given them a minute or two to practice and get used to what their rhythm will sound like. Now, they might be playing these on drums or other untuned percussion instruments. You might have them patting them on their knees or clapping them or whatever. So once they can all do their own rhythm, then you turn it into the rhythm train game. And it's pretty much like a pass it round the room game, except they have to be able to do their own rhythm and then do somebody else's rhythm. And then that somebody else has to respond by playing their rhythm and passing it on to somebody else. So it becomes a chain effect. Now, it can be quite tricky, so you might have to really walk them through it a few times before they get the idea of how to do it without upsetting the beat, because obviously you don't want everyone starting and stopping all the time. You want it to be a continuously moving train. So that's a fun one and very good for their ears and keeping their beat and rhythms going. Now, Jacob's Ladder is a really old one, which is very good as long as you have a big space and as long as you remember to give the students a few rules or warnings beforehand about safety, because there's going to be running involved, and Children, excitement, running can end up in tears if you're not very, very careful. So, having given you that warning, it is a fantastically fun game. Again, each student is going to be having to recognize how to read and respond when they hear their rhythm. You will have the students sitting with an opposite partner. So you'll have two rows or two lines of students. They'll be facing their opposing partner in the opposite team, and they'll be sitting in such a way that their legs are flat on the floor in front of them with their feet touching their opposing partner. So when you look down the two lines, you will see the legs which look like the rungs of a ladder, hence the name Jacob's Ladder. Now, each pair in that ladder will be allocated a rhythm card. And again, you need these up on your board on magnets or however you can attach them so that they can see the rhythms. And they need to respond when you clap their rhythm. So if you've got 20 kids in your class, you will have 10 rhythms. So you'll have two teams, and if you were to clap the rhythm that was of the people at the top of the ladder closest to the board, they're the number one rhythm, then they would have to jump up, just those two people, and they would have to go down the ladder, going over every pair of legs till they reach the bottom of the ladder. This is where the safety comes into it. Run around the outside of the ladder and then come back and sit down in their spot, and whoever reaches their spot first gets the point for their team. So, as I said, you've got to be very careful of the safety of fingers that people put out behind them when they're sitting on the floor, of feet or legs that wibble wobble around and trip people up when they're going down the ladder, all those sorts of things. But it's fantastic fun when they all know how to do it properly. And it's usually very noisy as well. Okay, now conversely, the rhythm clock is a very quiet one, and this is really good, I find, for the juniors, and that means that we will have a clock either drawn on the board or you can do it on the floor, and you would put on each number of the clock one of your rhythm cards, and then you would clap or play a rhythm and ask the class what time it is, meaning which number is it beside, and then they can clap it back to you. And you can do this again in teams. So you can have people sitting around the clock when you do it on the floor, have a group of people or two students per number, and they have to go to a particular spot or do a particular action when they are the ones who recognise the rhythm that they are sitting beside. So that's how you turn it into a team game. You can also do that as an individual one really easily. If you know how to play the game of Hangman, where you have to answer a question and you get to draw a part of the hangman and his noose and then the person, it's the same with Build a Snowman, where you have the pieces of a snowman, and each rhythm that they get correct gives them a part of the snowman to build. So you can use your rhythms in that way to get either two separate teams or three teams, however many teams you want, to build their snowman by recognising their rhythm correctly. Rhythm envelopes, that's one that takes a little bit more preparation, where you have to have an envelope for each team or each pair of, because often I find this works really well in smaller groups, and essentially you're going to, it's a little bit like bingo, except that they've got the rhythms on separate cards. They need to recognize when you clap a particular or play a particular rhythm, and then put it aside, and the first one to empty their envelope is the winner. So the first team that gets to empty their envelope And obviously you have to check back that they've got all the right ones out. I'm sure you all know how to play the game of bingo. So rhythm bingo is where it instead of being the usual number that's called out, it's a rhythm that's played or sung or whatever. Whereas the sticker is a great one again for the little kids. You would put a sticker underneath each rhythm card, and again you can do this on the floor where you have loose stickers, or you can do it with magnets on the back of your rhythm cards stuck to the board, or even use blue tack if you have to. And the idea is that only some of the rhythm cards have got stickers under them. You can turn it into a team game by having different coloured stickers. So I've got red stickers under some and black stickers under others. So you'll have the red team and the black team, or you can just do it by the number of stickers that each particular team accumulates. And all they have to do is one person at a time from each team chooses a rhythm, plays it or claps it correctly. They get the right to turn it over and see if there's a sticker there. And if they don't get it right, they have to put it back. If they do get it right, then they get to put that sticker for their team. Musicals app. Oh, this is so much fun. We have so much fun and laughter with this one. As you can see by all of the coloured cards on the page, we've got a zap card, which is why it's called Musical Zap. We've got up the top various rhythm cards. These have got the TTs and Zs for Zars, and there'd be tars in there as well. That just happens to be the page with no tars. And then we've got a whole bunch of cards that say zap, add 1 point to your team, or -2 from your team, or opponent loses a point, and so on and so forth. There's the actual one that says zap, is where you get your students to do star jumps, or there's another one which I didn't put on here, which is called the musical zap. So these are separate cards. So the zap one, you can get them to do something random, as I said, like you need to do 6 star jumps or whatever it might be. The musical zap, you can choose, or you can have some criteria. Do you want to dance or do you want to sing? And then they tell you, I want to dance. So you'll put on some music and they have to dance for 30 seconds. Or you can say, sing me the first verse of the national anthem, or whatever the current song is that you're learning. And that will earn them a point for their team. So you would have all of these cards intermittently woven through with the rhythm cards. So you'll have zap, musical zap, these zap ones that have got the points, and lots and lots of rhythm cards face down, 2 or 3 teams, however many teams you want, and each team takes a turn to turn up a card, and if they find a rhythm, they have to clap or play it correctly to get their point for their team, or they'll get one of these other random ones which will either add a point or not. And it's just particularly fun when you get the zap and the musical zap cards, because it really throws some fun and games in there for the kids. The bump and the poof ones are very similar, but instead of zapping them, you bump the cards onto one of the pile, onto your pile, and poof can be when they all disappear. So very similar sorts of games with the necessity to have a bunch of different cards there for them. You don't obviously have to do all of them, and you can build all of these things up progressively. Now I can see time is getting away from me. There's so many games to explore. Now, card types of pitch. The different sorts of pitch cards I use. Graphic notation, and there's an example on the page. The alphabet, or musical alphabet. The musical alphabet using note values and using rhythm. Individual note descriptions when you start to use the stave. 1-bar melodies along the lines of what we've been talking about with rhythm, where you have restricted note range to start with. So you might only use G, A and B, or C, D and E, or whatever it might be, and then gradually expand that out to 5 notes and then into an octave and so forth. you might have cards that have got chords and arpeggios or scales on. So they're just different examples. I think these would probably be very obvious also, that you'll start by learning about musical shape, things like ascending, descending, repeating, and so forth. You'll understand the musical alphabet, the instant recognition of notes on the stave. You'll relate it to how to find that note on your particular instrument as well. And then you'll recognize particular melodic patterns, which is where the musical shape also comes in, by hearing them or by reading them. And similarly, all the various concepts such as scales and chords. Now, many of the rhythm games that we talked about previously for individuals are also applicable or adaptable for use with pitch cards. So obviously you'll work through different levels. You'll start with perhaps the alphabet cards, which are literally just the letters of the alphabet on a card each, before you move into the ones that will have got the actual note value with the alphabet, and then go on to the note that's on the stave with no letter name on it whatsoever. That's a fairly typical progression. Things like the 1 minute club, where you have to name the notes in a minute or less. They're great fun if you are doing note recognition. Dice composing, where you take a dice which usually has 6 on it, numbers 1 through to 6, and you assign a different note. That could be an alphabet name. So number 1 is A, number 2 is B, number 3 is C, or whichever notes you want to use. And it becomes a random way of composing. So you can ask a student to roll the dice 8 times and write down what the 8 notes are in order, and then to play that back. You can take that as far as you want in terms of where you go with it from there. You can give them the opportunity to reorder them and come up with a pattern they prefer based on what was originally generated. The Order Me alphabet game is where you would put up 4 note cards or 4 alphabet cards, and you will put them up in a random order and then play them in a different order and ask the students to figure out what the order should be. So they have to put them in the correct order. So ordering up my cards. The disappearing card is usually where you will have several melody cards up there, and one of them gets taken away and they have to figure out which one has been taken away. So you'll go through them and play them and so forth, and then you'll take one away and they have to try and remember what that card is that you've taken away. Similarly with the turnover trick, where you'll turn one over and see if they can remember it. The lucky dip one's also really fun and easy when you're getting kids first starting to play instruments, either starting to play things like on the piano or whatever, or in the classroom as well with glockenspiels and other things like that that have got letter names on them for them. So they can pull out a card which has an alphabet name or an actual note on it, and then they have to play that on their instrument. You can then up the ante and get them to pull out 2 cards in a row. They have to play 2 notes in a row, or 3 or 4, just depending on the difficulty level you want them to progress to. So it's called lucky dip because they're essentially just pulling them randomly out of the top of the pile. Now the group games for pitch are similarly as with rhythm. You can use all of the individual pitch games and adapt them into group games. But there's one particular group game that I find really, really fun. Again, it's a physical game, which is great for some students who can't sit still, or as a bit of a brain break for them or whatever. And that's what's called the staff race game. So I would, in the classroom, put masking tape down to represent the stave and leave a decent amount of space between the lines for feet. And it's essentially going to be a stave that they will move up and down on to show where the note would be. So you would randomly pull out an alphabet card, hold it up for one of the students, and they would have to go to the correct line or space position on that stave that's on the floor. So obviously you'd have to go through the process of explaining which is the top and bottom of the stave, presumably whether you've got treble clef, bass clef, whatever it is you're working on. And usually if they have to do a line note, their feet have to be pointing directly upwards with the line going right through their feet like the note head would be. And if they're in space, their feet must not touch the lines. So if you divide them into 2 or 3 teams again, and each team gets a chance to warm up by doing one at a time, you can then make it into a race where you hold up one card and one person from each team has to get to the note first. And when you do this, I've actually done this where you do it across 7 different levels. The first level is when you concentrate on the line and space. So you'll do, right, we're doing the lines only, go to line 1, or go to line 4, or go to line 5. And then you'll do the spaces only and go to space 3, or go to space 2. And then on the whiteboard or whatever you've got there that you can use, you might put the names of the line notes for them to be able to see them, whilst you go on to the next level where they have to go to the line by the name of the letter name of the note, and then they go to the spaces according to the letter name of the note. And again, the cards are going to be the thing that you use to choose which one they have to do. So you'll be getting a student to turn up the next card, or you'll be turning up the next card, and hopefully on the back it says the correct name if it's a student who's doing it, so that they know that they've gone to the right spot. So you can use this with the alphabet cards or the note cards, and it's very much about getting them familiar with using the stave, and it's really, really useful and really good fun. Now the last sort of card type I've got here is number 5, the song card. So this one's pretty simple. Again, very useful for the little ones. So your preschoolers, your foundation through to grade 2 kids, where you might be doing lots of short little songs. So the song cards that I use are things like the bus down the bottom there. It's a picture that represents the song, or you might have the name beside it, like the ones on the left there, Starlight, Starbright, and so forth. So it's got a picture and the name. You might also have rhythm cards, such as the one up in the top right there, which relates to either the whole song or part of the song. And you might have then the same thing with the melody at the start or the whole song without actually the name of the song on there. So they're the different sorts of song cards. They obviously help you, or help the students with, recognizing songs. They also help with pitch and rhythm recognition in the same way that all the other games we talked about do as well. The sorts of games that I would use these for are things like, which song did you hear? So I would sing them a song and perhaps not use the words, so I would hum it or even play it, and they would have to recognize it by either the melody or the rhythm, depending on which way you're leading them. and you can get them to match the picture to the song name, match the song picture to the melody, match the song picture to the rhythm, depending on which batch of cards you are working with at the time. So they're the typical ways of using the song cards. Now, we're nearly at the end, so you've heard my voice yabbering for quite a while now. Some ideas on where you can get cards from and how to actually use them in terms of the delivery of them. So I use a lot of physical cards, and I've had a lot made for my music school over the years. A lot of the examples you saw in the early part, and another one on the slide at the moment. So you can make your own, and this is one thing I forgot to put on here, is using software like Canva. You can set up templates to make your own flashcards. Katie Wardrobe at Midnight Music has got a library of note values and things that you can download. I believe they're all for free still, and you can then make up your own cards if you've got the time and inclination. You can go to the teacherspaidteachers.com website. There's a gazillion lot of teachers out there who've done wonderful stuff, and you can get some of them for free. And there's a lot that are very extensive sets of cards that you can pay just a few dollars for. I've obviously got my own set, as I mentioned. A lot of these you can buy digital versions of to print up yourself. And the Kadai website has also got some melody and rhythm sets, quite large sets that you can use also. So if you wanted to print some off, or if you want to download some, you can use those sorts of digital versions through things like Google Slides, or however you like to deliver things digitally. Alternately, you can use any of the gazillion apps that are out there. I've just listed down 4 fairly popular flashcard apps. There's Quizlet and Brainscape, Flashcard Maker and Flashcard Max. They all have different functionality and different costs and everything else. Some of them are available as apps that are free, and a lot of them will allow you to create your own flashcards, but some of them can be a bit laborious in that creation, so it takes quite a bit of time. Others have huge libraries you can tap into already. So there's lots and lots of variety in the digital apps out there to help you with flashcards. Finally, a couple of tips for you. Magnets on the back of flashcards are awesome. Although I often have got 2 sets of flashcards, one with magnets that I can put on the classroom magnetic board, and one set that I would use for activities where the kids have to spread them out on the floor. Because I will get the magnetic strips in long lengths that you can buy at craft stores such as Spotlight, and attach it to the back of the cards. And obviously, if the kids are rubbing them across the floor, the magnets can come off. So that's why often 2 sets are great. Laminate everything, because otherwise they will wear out and you don't want that to happen. Duplicate sets, if you can manage to do 2 sets for all of the reasons I've mentioned before. And having a timer, either a physical egg timer or using the timer on your phone, can add an extra layer of difficulty, an extra level of fun to a lot of your flashcard games. The 1 Minute Club is a classic example. So it's time, I think, now for some questions. While I'm looking to see if there are any questions, you might like to have a look at the offer I put up here, which is in case you're after some help with any of your music school stuff. Just going to my website, there's a book there, special offer of $1 instead of the usual $29.95. Or you can contact me if you've got any questions or anything afterwards about tonight through Facebook and so forth. So if Kevin is still awake and I
know